Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about something that, if you're raising a child with OCD, this has probably happened to you at least once, if not a million times, and that is reassurance as a compulsion. And I want to talk today about how we respond to reassurance seeking in a way that is compassionate, understanding, and loving. Because I think sometimes we think, okay, we can't reassure our kids because it's going to grow their OCD. And so I'm not going to say anything. And that's not what we're talking about. So stay tuned. We'll dive all into that. But before we get started, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the US and outside the US. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is the right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. I also want to mention that my free series, Survival Tools for Parents Who Are Raising Kids with Anxiety and OCD, is going to be starting in the next few weeks. Whether you've taken this before or you've never taken it, it's a great opportunity to learn skills, get some practical education, and start implementing them while we're doing the series. It's a great time to learn and implement things and see change happening as you do the series, which is the feedback that I often get when people take this free series. You can register at atparentingsurvivalseries.com. All right, let's talk about reassurance. So reassurance in everyday parenting is intuitively what we do. It's completely normal. In fact, it's what good parents do. We reassure our kids that they're okay. We reassure our kids that they can get through things. We reassure them that they're fine. It's natural. And that's why it gets so confusing when we're told, when you start to dive into OCD treatment, when we're told that compulsive reassurance seeking is growing their OCD. And so what feels intuitively correct to do is actually growing the neural pathways in your child's brain and growing their OCD bigger, which sounds like a big, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that. But it's not clear cut and it takes time. So my hope today is by the end of this episode, you're going to understand the nuances of not using reassurance seeking as a compulsion and have a good idea of how to respond instead. So there is a difference between healthy reassurance versus reassurance as an OCD compulsion. So let me break that down. Healthy reassurance is telling kids they've got it. Healthy reassurance is letting them know that everything will be okay. Healthy reassurance is not talking to OCD. When your child is compulsively reassurance seeking, they're not even looking for your genuine support. They're literally looking for you to complete the OCD loop. So we reassure our kids all the time. Yes, I'll be back at 5. Or, yeah, I know this is scary and you've got this. And, this is a rough time in our life, but we're going to be okay, right? Or we're all safe in this house. That's healthy reassurance seeking. Not seeking. It's healthy reassurance. But when reassurance is an OCD compulsion, OCD wants you to respond in a very specific way because you're the metaphorical sink. You are literally, think about it this way, like you're washing their intrusive thought or feeling away. OCD is 2 parts. Part A is an intrusive thought or feeling. It's invasive. It doesn't feel aligned to who they are. It is intrusive. It is nonstop. And part B of OCD is that OCD wants you to do or avoid something in response to part A. It gives you the thought or the feeling and it says, you don't like this, do you? You want to get rid of this? Then do what I say. And that can be many different things. It could be mental compulsions, right? Repeat this in your brain 5 times and everything will be okay. Or it might be to avoid, don't sit on the left side of the couch because your dad sat there and he's disgusting and you're going to catch that if you sit on there, right? So it could be avoidance or it could be a physical compulsion. Go wash your hands. Go ask your mom this question. Go confess this thing to your parent. So it's important for us to first understand the foundation of how OCD looks. The intrusive thought or feeling is what starts it. Imagine a loop, right? That's point A. Go up to point B. Point B is what OCD wants your child to do. Whether it is mentally argue with the thought, debate the thought and say, I would never do that. Or seek out reassurance from an external person. And by external, I mean you. You complete that part B. And the more you do or avoid for OCD, the more you do whatever OCD is saying that you need to do or avoid to get that brief relief, which is a lie, the more you go back down to part A, the more intrusive thoughts and feelings you get. It's a vicious loop. That's why we talk about OCD being a hamster wheel, because you're pedaling, but you're getting nowhere fast. You are growing OCD because you're buying into the lie that if you just do what OCD wants you to do or avoid, OCD will go away. And what we try to teach kids is that that paradigm that OCD tries to sell you is faulty. It's fake. It's not real. It's the thing that gets you stuck in the disorder. And for you as a parent, you have to see, or it's helpful for you to see, that you're part of that paradigm when they involve you in part B of that loop. And so they can't move on when you are participating in the compulsion. You are an integral part of that. They need you to complete that part so they can move on and finish the loop. And so that's where we come in as parents to say, I can disrupt this cycle. It doesn't mean that your child isn't going to find something to do or avoid to grow their OCD that doesn't involve you. Yeah, they might do that. OCD is very resilient. It will find another way to grow. But the first step of the outer layer of crushing OCD is the parental involvement. And the reason why it's the outer layer is because it's something we can control. It's so hard to resist OCD's demands for our kids. It's easier for us. And I know that seems like, really, Natasha, it's not easy. And it doesn't feel easy. And I'm not discounting that. It's a nightmare to not provide that compulsive reassurance. And we're going to get into it. But it's a step that you do have control over. You have very little control over if your child resists compulsions. You have very little control of how long they wash their hands, or if they do mental compulsions that you don't even see. But the one piece of the puzzle that you do have control over is whether you participate or not. Just like if someone was a drug addict, you could not give them the money to go buy the drugs, but they might find the monies elsewhere and they might continue doing the drugs. OCD is a very addictive, hard thing to break, and we don't want to be part of it. So when you're reassuring and you're growing OCD, that looks very different. You are providing a very specific response. So let's talk about what that can look like. And it looks different for every theme. So I'm going to give you a couple of common ones, but it can literally be anything. The first step is knowing your child's OCD theme. If you don't understand their theme, then you're going to miss it. Because once you understand, oh, my child has moral OCD. Now, kids can have multiple themes, but when I understand they have moral OCD, now I know that a lot of their intrusive thoughts and feelings are about being a bad person or doing bad things or having done bad things. And so when they're asking me questions related to morals or reviewing past experiences and perseverating on those, or I had this thought and I don't know if this makes me a bad person, it's going to be a red flag that I might be talking to OCD. Now, it doesn't mean 100% you're going to be talking to OCD, because our kids are still kids and they do have moral questions and they do have life questions. And so it's not a direct correlation, but it will certainly be a red flag for me if my child has moral OCD and then all of a sudden they're asking me if they thought that someone was fat in their head, if that made them a bad person. Am I talking to them? Do they really want to know this answer? Or are they wanting me to complete an OCD loop? Well, if I already know they've got moral OCD, my spidey senses are going to be up because I'm going to be like, this is one of their themes. Like my daughter has a lot of existential OCD. Sometimes I think she's wanting to have this philosophical conversation. And then halfway into it, I realize she is doing compulsions with me. She's not okay. And she's talking about her theme. But it can be hard. It can be hard. The first step is really understanding OCD. And this is why I tell parents it's really important to fully get OCD. If you want to understand all the different OCD themes, I do have a free PDF that outlines all the really common OCD themes in kids and teens. You can get that at natashadaniels.com/OCD themes. Start with the education. Go outside of your tunnel vision and learn about other themes because OCD doesn't stay in its lane. So if my child has moral OCD, they might ask me if they're a bad person, if they did certain things in the past, which they may have legitimately done. It doesn't mean that's still not OCD. They might have thoughts in their head that they need to ask me if it's okay. They might ask for permission for things that they can do and they don't need permission for. They might confess things they've done, wanting me to forgive them for things that don't really require that. They might ask reassurance seeking things if they have germs and contamination themes. They might wonder if where my hands were, did I wash my hands? Did this touch this? Did this touch that? Those kind of questions. If I'm worried about my food, I might ask them if it smells weird. Does it taste weird? Does it look weird? I might ask questions like, I touched this and then I touched my mouth. Does that mean that I'm going to get sick? This is a really common one that I hear all the time. I touched my butt and then I touched my mouth. Is that okay? I touch my private parts and then I touch my mouth, or I touch my face. Is that okay? It can literally be anything. So tap into the OCD themes, get that PDF so you have an idea of like the buffet of OCD themes that kids can have. And then narrow it down and figure out what their theme might be. And then pay attention to the kinds of questions they're asking so that you can be aware. That's important. Now, why is reassurance a bad thing? Well, when we are giving reassurance to OCD, we're on the hamster wheel and we're literally connecting the dots and growing the OCD loop. And it grows the neural pathways in your child's brain long term, which grows the OCD stronger. When we're talking about OCD treatment, part of it is breaking and disrupting those neural pathways that are strengthening and hardening OCD in the brain. And so when we delay doing a compulsion, when our child delays washing, and then they eventually avoid washing, just to give you an example, they strengthen an alternative neural pathway and they're weakening the OCD neural pathway and they improve. They learn how to sit with the discomfort when they have those thoughts. They're not firing those neurons and getting completely distressed and uncomfortable. They're just sitting with it. When we are part of that, when they're trying to fire those neural pathways and it's like firing over here and it needs to be received over there, and we're not participating, we're disrupting that as well. It doesn't mean that you're going to do it all the time. It takes time to pull back your reassurance. But that's why we need to do it, because we don't want to be part of the OCD loop that's actually hardwiring OCD in our kids. And so that's the short answer. It's the obvious answer, but it is hard. And when you're learning to pull back your reassurance, there's a couple of things that we have to be mentally prepared for. And that is, you're not going to always pull back reassurance. There's going to be times where you just have to give it because it's too much. Your child can't handle it, or you can't handle it, or you're in a place where you can't handle it, or you need to move on and you need to get things going and you're going to do it. And it's really important to have some self-compassion for this parenting journey, some self-forgiveness of, I'm not expecting to do this 100% of the time because it's hard. And you're going to provide that reassurance periodically. And so I just want to normalize that and reduce the guilt and the rigidity around this, because as a parent raising my own kids with anxiety, OCD, ARFID, ADHD, and all the others, I know that there are times where we just are going to do the thing that intellectually we know isn't the therapeutic response. And that is okay. I do that. I mean, I do things all the time where I'm like, this isn't really therapeutic, or this isn't really the right response for your anxiety or OCD, as far as like long-term success, but I'm going to have to give it to you right now. And so that's important as you embark on this, is understanding that it's not one and done. Okay, when we get back from a break, I'm going to talk to you about some alternative responses and how to start pulling back that compulsive reassurance in a systematic, loving, compassionate way. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
Welcome back. Okay, so let's talk about the first thing you want to do. The first thing you want to do is start to recognize, when are you talking to OCD? So start to observe, learn about those OCD themes, natashadaniels.com/OCD themes, educate yourself, and then talk to your child and say something like this. I noticed that sometimes your OCD wants to get reassurance from me. And I notice that it seems like you're reviewing things that you did in the past that might have been quote unquote bad. And it's like your OCD wants me to tell you that it's okay. And what I'm learning from my own education on how to help you and support you with OCD is that when I give you that reassurance and I say, it's not bad, or that was so long ago, or don't worry about it. When I respond to you as if it's a true question and not a compulsion from OCD, I'm doing my part to grow your OCD, and I'm completing the OCD loop. And so from now on, I'm going to learn how to respond to you so that I'm not growing your OCD. So that is the first way I would explain it to your child. I do have a YouTube video on how reassurance Grows OCD, and it is directly for people who have OCD, so kids, teens, and young adults or adults. So I will link that in the show notes so that you guys can check that out. That might be another thing to show them. Here's a video on it if they're willing to watch a video. Or you can get bravery points or incentives for watching this video. That can be helpful. I might start slowly and I might say something like, you come and get reassurance from me 50 times a day. And maybe if you feel like doing this, you can count how often, maybe take 3 days and count how often OCD is asking for reassurance. If it is nonstop, it might be too big of a project. But if it's not like every 5 seconds, it might be interesting to get some data and say, I counted yesterday and I answered OCD 55 times. And so what I want to do, because I know that it's really hard when I don't answer OCD. And again, notice what I'm doing. I'm personifying OCD. If you have a name for OCD, that's even better. I would say Mr. Bossy or whoever, OCD is called. But even if I don't have a name for OCD, I'm personifying it. I'm not talking about you. You come and get reassurance from me. I'm saying OCD is getting reassurance from me. And so I am externalizing it from them, which is important to do for their self-esteem and their pride and their shame, all good stuff to externalize it. And then I might say, I know it's really hard. And so I don't want to pull back all at once. And so I'm going to create these reassurance cards. And I created 40 of them. Now, if your child is seeking reassurance 10 times a day, then maybe you create 8 cards. If they're asking for reassurance 4 times a day, then maybe you create 3 cards. It's going to be different for each one of you based on how severe this issue is. But I'll say, here are 40 cards. I'm just using the most extreme. So even those of you that are like, it's constant, I'm even talking to you guys. Here are 40 cards. And if you need reassurance, you have to cash it in with one of these cards. And when your cards are gone, I will no longer talk to OCD. And that's where you start. And so, you give them that reassurance and they have to hand you a card. The reason why that's actually helpful is because they can physically see that they're asking to grow OCD. And depending on their humor and sensitivity, in my practice, I used to write on these cards something like, I want to feed OCD, or OCD wants a meal. You can come up with a kind of a funny expression that you can put on these cards, and you can just print them out, create them in Canva or Photoshop and just print them out, or just scribble them old school. It doesn't matter. But it's a reminder. It's a physical reminder, a tactile reminder that they are growing OCD in that moment, which can be very helpful. Now, if they're depressed and they're hopeless, this may not be a very effective approach. Obviously, always talk to your therapist if you have one for guidance, but it is a really powerful tool in and of itself just for that. But then when they run out of cards, you respond with these alternative responses that are very loving, but not feeding OCD. Now, spoiler alert, your child will not like these answers. You don't gauge the success of what I'm talking about on your child high-fiving you and writing you a thank you note. That's not going to happen. Your child is going to get angry, most likely. They're going to get frustrated. They may even have a meltdown. They might follow you around the house. They might bombard you with questions. They might scream that you don't understand. They might tell you that you're not helping. They might ask you, who gave you this horrific advice? That's all normal. That's part of extinguishing this behavior. And it's rough. And that is why some people get support from a space therapist. Ellie Leibowitz's space treatment approach is about systematically pulling back your accommodations of OCD and anxiety. And there are space trained therapists at spacetreatment.net that work solely with the parent to support you, because this is hard to stomach. And for those of you that cave rather easily in general in your parenting, or even if you have a dog and when they beg for scraps, you eventually give in, this is going to be hard because you have to have a stomach for it. And you have to know intellectually that you are helping them, even though they do not look like they're getting help in that moment. They're looking dysregulated. They're looking frustrated. But again, the key to OCD treatment is teaching our kids to learn how to sit with discomfort. And when we are robbing them of the discomfort, we're robbing them of successful change. They have to learn to sit with the discomfort. And that's really hard when we don't want our kids to struggle. But that is the process of healing and crushing OCD, is learning how to tolerate and build up resilience to the intrusive thoughts. And when we rescue them by answering those reassurance questions, we're robbing them of that opportunity, that healing opportunity. And that's pretty crazy when you think of it in that way, right? That could be powerful when you think about it in that way. So some alternative responses that they're not going to like, but I think shows compassion still, is, I'm sorry that OCD is causing you distress right now. Or I know OCD is wanting to talk to me, and I love you, and I'm not going to grow OCD with you. Or I'm sorry that this is hard for you right now. I like to say I'm sorry because I just want to validate I know you're struggling. Or maybe drop the I'm sorry and just say, I can tell that you're struggling right now, and I don't want to participate in growing OCD. Or, and I know you can handle it. I know this is hard for you, and I know you can handle it, one step at a time. And you're going to get things like, I can't handle it. This is hard. But the key is to support them. And another thing might be, I know you're brave, or I know this is hard, and I also know that you're brave. I know that you're resilient. I know that you can do hard things. All the while, they might be shouting at you, I can't. Let's talk about some other ones. I can see you're feeling anxious right now. Or how do you think you can handle this discomfort right now without growing OCD? Or remember, you were brave enough to try this yesterday. Let's keep going. Or that sounds like OCD is talking. I'm not going to answer that question because I don't want to make OCD stronger. Or I know that was tough not to ask again, and I'm proud of how you handled it. Right? It's going to be different each time, and you might get to the point where you say, I'm not going to respond anymore. I love you, and I know I'm frustrating you. I totally get that, and I'm not going to respond anymore. And you leave it at that. So I just want to emphasize that the goal is not to leave kids feeling unsupported. The goal is to not leave them on radio silent and not respond to them at all, but it's to help them build confidence in tolerating the discomfort or the uncertainty that's happening because of OCD. I know OCD wants me to answer that right now, and OCD would love it if I answered right now, because that would grow your OCD, and that's what OCD wants right now. OCD is telling you that the only way you're going to get relief is if I answer. But if I keep answering over and over, OCD is just going to want more answers. That's how OCD works. Now, I wouldn't work on trying to convince them to agree with me as to why I shouldn't provide them with compulsive reassurance. That's not the goal. I would answer one time, pick one of those. I'm actually going to create a PDF for you with all of these options, because I know sometimes it is not a normal thing to say. Sometimes parents are like, can you write down examples, or can you role play this for me? Especially in the AT parenting community, they'll often be like, can you give us a handout with exactly what to say? And when people message me in the AT parenting community, I'll role play what they can say specifically to their kids. But for you, I do have a PDF for this episode. Remember last episode when I told you I was going to do more PDFs? Well, you're welcome. This one's going to be a PDF too. I'm going to just do a PDF on alternative responses that you can use instead of compulsive reassurance. And I will put a lot of the ones I just said down so you can get that. You can get that at natashadaniels.com/handouts. What I decided I was going to do was I'm just going to create a page that has all my handouts. And every time I offer you a handout, which I hope will be most episodes, you'll just go to that page, and then you can download that PDF. So I hope that you find that helpful. But it's important to recognize that we're not going to debate or argue or try to convince our kids that we're doing the right thing. We're going to give one supportive statement, and then we're going to move on. Maybe you give a couple when they keep coming back, and then eventually you set a boundary that says, I know OCD is not going to let this go, but I'm not going to respond anymore to OCD. And that might be hard. And you might even come up with a plan that says, when your OCD is not letting it go, I'm going to put headphones on after that. And so you might say, I'm going to put headphones on and I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z. And a lot of times it's kind of good for you to come up with an excuse to maybe go do an activity. I got to go cook. I'm going to put my headphones on and listen to my audiobook. Or I'm going to go take a walk if someone else is in the house or they're old enough to be left alone. I wouldn't leave anyone who's distressed alone, but maybe I'm going to go sit out in the backyard and garden, or I'm going to go to the bathroom. Find an excuse to disrupt the flow of their questions. That could be helpful. And it might be relentless for a little while, but when you stick with it and you're consistent, then eventually OCD gives up and it extinguishes. And the extinguishing can take a little while. And so normally it revs up and it gets more intense before it gets better. That's why it's hard to stomach. So the other thing that we want to do is we want to have these conversations before we start implementing this. So you don't implement this without having a discussion beforehand with your child that this is a new approach that you're going to be using. Even if you don't use reassurance cards, you still want to have a conversation of, I'm going to start doing this. And you want to be consistent. And so either you use reassurance cards or you say, this type of question I'm not going to answer. Like, or maybe when you're talking about moral OCD, I'm not going to answer. The more specific, the better, so that there are very tight boundaries. Or maybe it's a time of day, from breakfast to, lunchtime, I'm not going to answer any reassurance questions. And then you can ask me whatever you want at the end of the day. Even that is teaching them to have to hold on to stuff until later in the day. And then you have to keep moving the dial. You don't just stay with that. Then you might use reassurance cards, or you might just make that window smaller and smaller until there's no time left for them to ask those questions. The main thing I'm trying to convey is that this takes time and it's not one and done, and it's a process. So I hope that you find that helpful. If you want some hands-on tools to help your child with anxiety and OCD, definitely sign up for my series. We're going to give you concrete support like this, but in a broader way. We're going to talk about exposures. We're going to talk about how to find the core fear. We're going to talk about how to incentivize them. Lots of good stuff that help you create a very therapeutic home environment to help your child crush anxiety and OCD. So check that out, atparentingsurvivalseries.com. I hope that you're finding this podcast helpful. If you are, don't forget to hit a star on iTunes or Google Play or wherever, or Spotify, wherever you consume these podcast episodes. I greatly appreciate that. And to show my appreciation, if I find one, I like to read a review. So I want to thank Megan, who wrote on Spotify, "Hi, Natasha. I've been listening to your podcast for a couple months now. Thank you for publishing this episode." She's talking about the one that I did that was how to help young children with OCD. We have a 5-year-old that we suspect has PANS and we know for sure has OCD. I've learned so much from you and I'm so grateful that you have this as a resource since we're not doing therapy yet. I feel like I need all the help I can get right now. Well, and I'm glad, Megan, that I am part of that help. That makes me happy. So maybe if you write a review, I'll be reading yours next time. Don't forget to find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.